So, ladies and gentlemen, when the Montreal Canadiens were at their peak in the mid 1970s with their four straight Stanley Cups, their defensive line, which included Bob Gainey, Rick Chartraw, Jimmy Roberts, and this player, Doug Jarvis, played one in every 3 minutes. Now, he didn't play the power play very often, or Jarvis didn't, but when they were an even strength, Montreal would send the defensive line out for the majority of second and third line play. They'd be called to hold back the top scorers in the NHL. And this player was considered one of the best defensive forwards of a generation and the most durable. Now, Doug Jarvis could best be described as probably pound for pound one of the most durable skaters in the history of the NHL. Born Douglas MacArthur Jarvis on March 24th, 1955, played with the Habs, the Capitals, and the Hartford Whalers in the NHL, and he is tenured in the association. Led him to break Gary Unger's consecutive game streak. He ended up with 964 games. He never missed a regular season game in his career, which began on October 8, 1975, and ran until 1987. He was assistant coach of the Bruins for a while, and he's now currently a senior advisor for the Vancouver Canucks. Now, Jarvis, like many of the top young players in the Central Hockey League, got his start in the OHL with a prestigious career for the Peterborough Petes, where he served as a strong forward, taking very important faceoffs and quarterback their special teams unit. Now, due to this great play, he was chosen to represent Team Canada at the 1974 World Juniors, where Jarvis helped the team to a bronze, and he scored 4 goals in 5 games. After a big 133-point season with the Petes in 74-75, he was selected to the Ontario Junior Hockey League First All-Star team, and a very, very well-regarded person in the 75 draft. He was picked 24th overall by the Leafs in the 75 draft, and eventually also drafted 3rd overall by the Houston Aeros. Well, here it gets kind of bizarre. He was eventually traded to Montreal for kind of a AHL lower pro player called Greg Hubik. And to tell you, Greg Hubik is not a household name, not even his own household. Now, when Jarvis started playing with Montreal, his defensive play really stood out, impressed the media, impressed the real fans of the NHL. He played 7 years for Montreal, again teaming up with Gainey, sometimes Robertson, Chartroff, sometimes Barry Wilson on that key defensive line. He won 4 Stanley Cups for Montreal between 76 and 79, and he eventually started to score more goals. In the 81 season, he notched 20 goals. But by the time the lack of success in the playoffs was really starting to wear in Montreal, and by the 83 season, he found himself out of Montreal when he was traded with Langway and England for Ryan Walter and Ricky Green of the Capitals. Um, he brought that defensive play to the Capitals' defense and quickly turned the Capitals into Stanley Cup contender. And in 83-84, he was awarded the Frank J. Selke Trophy for being the outstanding defenseman in the league. Now, halfway through the 86 season, he was traded to the Whalers, and it was in Hartford that Jarvis set the NHL record for more consecutive games. Like I said, breaking Gary Unger's record. In 1987, he got special recognition for that, winning the Perseverance and Achievement Award, Bill Masters Memorial Trophy in 87, 89, 88. But unfortunately, later on, Hartford kind of gave up on him, sent him to the minors, but eventually his NHL career came to an end. A lot of people thought he could have reached 1,000 games. So do I, but we'll never know. You'll never see a player probably play as many consecutive games that he did, especially in the travel NHL that we now have. Now, after he retired, he was hired by the Stars to serve as assistant coach to Minnesota's head coach, Pierre Pagé. And 2 years later, the North Stars hired former line mate Bob Gainey as coach and GM. The two helped the Stars reach the Stanley Cup Finals in '91, where he lost to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, in '93, the team was relocated to Dallas, became the Dallas Stars, and he stayed with the North Stars for 14 years where Dallas won their first Stanley Cup in 1999. Now his 14-year tenure with the overall with the Stars was quite impressive because we always knew he was looked up to by these various players on the squad because if you wanted to learn how to play defense, you could just look at Jarvis in practice and in the regular season contest to show that this what needed to be done. Now his 14-year tenure with the team was the longest period of time an assistant coach has stayed with the same team. He then moved on to assistant coach with Montreal from '05 until 2009, and he coached the Hamilton Bulldogs from 2003 to 2005. Now, he was hired by the Vancouver Canucks as assistant coach during the 2016 offseason, and he left his role at 2017-18, and he's now a senior advisor for the Canucks. Now, we had the recent Hockey Hall of Fame inductions, and I really think if you look at it, for his tenure, the Stanley Cups, his durability, he's still a Hockey Hall of Fame long shot. A lot of people believe that his combination, and we're getting into players like that have done a lot as a player and an executive, because Jarvis has brought his intelligence and his quality of play to all the seasons he's given, and considering he's been in the NHL on and off into his fifth decade, I think that's quite sixth decade actually. I think that's quite impressive. You see how he came in the 1970s. So far 43, 44 seasons total. Again, over 6 decades or calendar decades like Gordie Howe. I think Jarvis's respect is well deserved, and like I said, you're getting into the vintage category for NHL players. But like I said, 4 cups, World Junior Bronze, Selkie. Probably the second best defensive player of his era behind Bob Gainey, and selected players, throughout the league. But I still wonder, I still wonder what was up with Toronto trading him. Did Toronto draft him to trade him? You think they could have got more of that? This is like the Danny Daoust for Carbonneau situation where Danny Daoust left Montreal for Toronto, made room for Carbonneau. I think Doug Jarvis, basically what you see is what you get. He was always there, doing his job, never took a bad penalty, intellectual, good face-off guy. And you look at I always wonder if Jarvis was around for the game, the bigger games. If he wasn't there, he would have won. I know it was big news when he missed the playoff game. I think it was a 78 season or something, or 79. He missed the playoff game. That's Jarvis not playing was big news, because like I said, to see Carbonneau kind of take his place on the Habs, is quite interesting. Because for better part of 30 years, Montreal had the best defensive players in the league, even going back to the 60s, 40 years, with the Jules Tremblay and everybody else. So, ladies and gentlemen, on COVID Sunday, this is the latest in the Sports File podcast. If you like this, please leave a like, a comment, or subscribe. We are getting close to 88,000 overall YouTube hits on my channel, and the majority, of course, is the great NHL fans that encourage the history of the NHL. I'm glad to have the opportunity to bring forward these little mini essays, because with a modern generation where it has not seen Montreal win a cup for 27 years, it wasn't just Lafleur, Lemaire, Bahovlich, Robinson, Savard, Lapointe, Dryden helped win. It was the Jarvises, the Chartreuse, the Pierre Bouchard. Pierre Bouchard will be part of a podcast later on talking about his family legacy going back to Butch Bouchard. Again, anyway, the red, white, and blue are strong in this podcast. Keep supporting. I'll keep making it. Have a good day.